Good day, class. Good day, everybody. Welcome back to our video lecture. It has been a while since I last posted. And on today's video lecture, it is going to be the last topic that I will be talking or discussing, still on the subject EM11, technology for secondary language education. So in this juncture, let's not waste any time. Allow me to share my screen to you all so we could access our PowerPoint presentation. So here it is. Unit 5, this is very interesting. Hence, in this unit, we're going to be exploring on open-ended tools and their uses in teaching and learning language skills. And in here, we will be exposed to a lot more tools or resources that we can find online and we could basically utilize so that we can assure that our teaching is technology integrated. And since you guys are Gen Z, I believe gadgets, internet are basically default in your learning. So how much more in the next years to come, knowing the kind of students that we all have. So of course, pretty much, we basically need to make use of technology. So open-ended tools. Now, there are 5 lessons that we are going to talk about. In Unit 5, we have Lesson 1, Scaffolding Strategies for Student Learning in a Language Classroom. So we will explore what scaffolding is. And then later on in Lesson 2 is we will explore on using presentations on how we could teach language skills. And I'm referring here to PowerPoint presentations. And then Lesson 3, we will be looking into using spreadsheets in language learning. And then in Lesson 4, it becomes more interesting since here we will explore more and it's going to be looking into digital storytelling, blogging, podcasting, broadcasting, and improving language skills. And we will conclude it with Lesson 5, which would allow us to further explore on other technology tools and applications for teaching and learning English language. For example, we look into mobile assisted language learning. We'll also look into how we could use QR code, the Powtoon, the Canva, Kahoot, even Mentimeter, and a lot more that we could explore. And I would also like to give you an additional where we could explore further. For example, I would let you know how to make use of an ed puzzle, which is very, very convenient, especially if we are going to do some distant learning approach or even blended learning approach. And at the same time, even the play post-it, which I also learned when I had a training with the Texas International Education Consortium. So in this time, let's take a look at Lesson 1, which is Scaffolding Strategies for Student Learning in a Language Classroom. Now, scaffolding, it is actually, class, very important that we kind of make sure that students are being guided. When we say scaffolding, we don't actually directly, teach everything all at once to the learners, but we make it step by step. And this is very obvious that we use this specific strategy, but there are a lot of strategies we can do scaffolding. For example, we're teaching our learners to read, okay, the beginner readers. We are teaching students how to write. We have to make sure we do scaffolding. And it's not just one strategy, but it's gonna be a lot of strategies. So this time we will take a look at top scaffolding strategies that we could utilize with our students.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education, Instructional Scaffolding.
So we call it the instructional scaffolding.
Next, we'll briefly look at some different types of scaffolding. Instructional scaffolding can be broken down into 2 different types. The first type is called soft scaffolding, and the second type, you guessed it, is hard scaffolding.
So again, remember,
continuing, we'll take a look at how
we have 2 types of scaffolding, the soft and the hard. Soft scaffolding, and then we do have the hard scaffolding.
Can actually scaffold in the classroom. It's best first to develop a rapport with the students. The rapport will only deepen as the teacher provides prompts and explanation for the students. Next, teachers should assess students for their knowledge level of topic of study. Formative assessments are great for this.
Okay, we develop rapport or good relationship with our students, and at the same time, we look into the knowledge level.
Then, select a task for the student that aligns with curriculum standards and the teacher's lesson planning objectives. This can be a whole class or individual for the student.
Then we select the
Up
task.
next is the topic of classroom scaffolding.
Okay, I'm sorry, but then we actually look into
Task for the student that
the
aligns with
select
curriculum
task.
standards and the teacher's lesson planning objectives. This can be a whole class or individual for the student. Because the teacher has assessed the student's knowledge, that teacher should be able to anticipate upcoming errors on behalf of the student. Next, we must apply the scaffold to the task. So if the task is a compare and contrast essay, maybe provide a partially filled Venn diagram on the subject. And as students improve, teachers should begin to remove the scaffold. Perhaps graphic organizers aren't warranted anymore. You don't want the students to become reliant on the scaffold.
Okay, so when we say scaffolding, it's actually guiding the learner step by step. But when the learner already can do it, plus we are going to remove it because they are now ready to do things on their own. So for example, of course, we do scaffold, we scaffold our learners. How to do that is we develop good relationship with our learners. We pull, or we not pull, but we make sure that they have knowledge on something, or we put into information or knowledge to them, and then we make use of a task, or we select a task. And then before they do that, we could already anticipate the students' errors. And the fifth one is we apply the scaffold. And then after that is we gradually remove the scaffold. So I am going to make this a little bit more concrete so you would really understand. Very simple scenario where you are going to do scaffolding to the learner is how to zip a bag. But this is very, very simple example. Imagine you are teaching a student, or you are teaching a child how to zip a bag. Because, for example, you're teaching a toddler how to zip a bag. The very simple concept of scaffolding is, of course, you develop rapport, you notice the child so that the child would be comfortable to you, being the older person who's going to teach the child. And then after that is you tell the child, this is a zipper, this is, so like the parts, or what is the child is seeing in the bag that he or she needs to zip, right? So you're going to make sure that the child knows what he is or she is holding, how do we call it, and things like that. And then later on, we will define or identify rather the task that we are going to let the student do. So what could be the task that the student do is, of course, to zip the bag. And then we have to anticipate error. So what could be the possible mistake that a child or that a toddler could do when zipping a bag? So maybe if the toddler would do it in a way that the toddler would not be careful, maybe somewhere in the middle of him or her zipping the bag, it could stop, right? So it could stop because the cloth portion of the zipper, or the cloth portion may be eaten by a zipper. So I don't really, that's the concept or the idea. So that is something that you are going to think of. That could be a possible error. So you have to make sure that you could mitigate that error before it could happen. So now you will apply the scaffold. How would you apply the scaffold? So basically the toddler already has an idea, no? The toddler knows you, so you already have developed a rapport between you and the toddler. The toddler knows already how to, what do we call, or the child rather knows already how do we call these parts of a zipper and stuff like that. And then you already also identify, you told the toddler or the child, what you are going to do is you will zip the bag, and then you would anticipate error. You have to be careful, because if you are going to zip it very quickly and you won't be careful, tendency you would be stuck in the middle, and it could end up, or you could destroy, or you could damage the bag, specifically the zipper part, right? That could be a possibility. So of course the child would be careful. Now, how would you do or apply a scaffold? So to apply the scaffold is that you will let the child hold the zipper, and then your other hand will also hold the hand of the toddler or the child, and then together you are going to zip the bag first. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. Nag-hold ang bata or sa zipper, and then your other hand is also holding the hand of the child. And then after that, slowly, nag-zip mo together, and slowly you are going to release your hand in a way na ang motiwa sa pag-zipper, only the child. So there, katong nag-hold ka sa hand sa bata, and you guys are doing together the zipping of the bag, that is the scaffolding part. And then pag hinay-hinay na nimong buhi sa imong kamot, that is already, you are gradually removing the scaffold. And it's the student or the child is doing the zipping already until nahumaniyag zipper ang bag. That is also evident class when we are going to basically teach the student how to write, right? Okay, you're going to hold the student's hand, nag-hold siya sa pencil, you will hold it, and then you are going to guide the student how to write, and then eventually, nahuman nakag-write sa isa ka syllable baron, the child will do it himself or herself. That is scaffolding. Now, we'll proceed to...
Up next is the topic of classroom scaffolding.
Examples.
Here are just a few types of instructional scaffolds. First, a teacher can provide cue cards to the students. These cards can have visual representations, mnemonics, and other sorts of information for solving problems. Another type of instructional scaffold is to give students examples of problems. Examples can help students get over the hill when they're stuck on what to do next. Vocabulary books work very well. This will help a student understand the meaning of words in different contexts. Teachers can easily prompt a student to stimulate their achievement. There are verbal prompts and physical prompts, such as point to what to do next. Low-functioning special needs students may need little hints from time to time. Give them a hint that may spark their thinking. Graphic organizers are exceptional scaffolding tools. With graphic organizers, students are able to bridge the gap between connecting concepts and ideas.
Okay, we do have also classroom examples. You can have cue cards as a technique to scaffold. Students' learnings examples, also good. Vocabulary books, prompting and graphic organizing, organizers giving students hints. Those could also be an example of a scaffolding.
Continuing, we'll take a look at some scaffolding guidelines for educators to follow. It's important for educators to give praise and encouragement. Just because a teacher gives a scaffold doesn't mean that the student will take it. Praise helps. Teachers must assign appropriate tasks to the student. Some tasks may be well beyond the student's ability. In that case, scaffolding won't be enough. Scaffolding should include various types of supports, and by that I mean not just academic, but social and emotional support. Students should be afforded second chances. If a student makes a mistake, even with the supports and scaffolds, they should continue to try and try again. And lastly, teachers must frequently check for understanding, which they can easily do through formative assessments. Helps educators identify where and when to scaffold.
So we do have guidelines. We provide the students praise if there is a need to. Well, even if the child didn't make it really 100% right, is giving the child phrases rather would also help the child wanting to try again, because it's the idea of scaffolding. You would give the child second chances until the child would be able to make it right, and then you would do formative assessments as well. And also class, that formative assessments, they are not meant for grading.
Now, before we finish this presentation, we're going to explore some challenges and criticisms of instructional scaffolding. Creating, securing resources, and implementation can be a time-consuming process. Different students in the same classroom may need different types of scaffolds. If teachers are committed to scaffolding, they must take the time and really get to know the student. There is no other way to do it. Also, critics believe that scaffolding can lead to students becoming too dependent on the scaffolds.
Okay,
students often feel insecure when scaffolds are removed.
Yeah, the problem with scaffolding, it could be time consuming. And of course, you really need to know your students. And at the same time, students may develop total dependence. But then, as a teacher, it is important. So you know what specific topics students need scaffolding, and what also specific topic that students actually do not really need scaffolding. So scaffolding, it's breaking up the learning into chunks. Okay, we break the learning into chunks. We provide them the tool. We create a structure with each chunk. With that, it would be easier for the students to digest our topic. So in scaffolding reading, We are looking here about reading. So you guys are English language teachers. We are English language teachers. We are expected to be teaching the students the four macro skills. So for example, you might preview the text. Okay, this could be our strategy when you teach reading, reviewing the text first, and then we discuss the key vocabulary or the unfamiliar words that are really being, of course, talked about or will be included in the story, in the text, and then chunk the text, and then we read and discuss as we go. With differentiation, you might give a child an entirely different piece of text to read. Or we could also shorten the text or alter it a bit or modify the writing assessment that follows after it. So scaffolding is actually what I'm sorry, I have to go back. So scaffolding is actually what you do first with a kid. So for those students who are still struggling, we scaffold. You may need to differentiate by modifying an assignment or making accommodations like choosing a more accessible text or assigning an alternative project. And scaffolding and differentiation, they do have something in common though. In order to meet students where they are and appropriately scaffold a lesson or differentiate instruction, you have to know the individual student, and you need to also know the collective zone of proximal development of your learners, like the zone of proximal development as to what specific that the student really needs to be to be scaffolded, because we need to make sure that we give guidance to our students before they could actually do things right, because that is our task being their teacher. So the scaffolding strategies, we have the use of first language. So for example, as a teacher, you are teaching, of course, we are teaching English language. How could we scaffold students to be learning new vocabulary and to know how to or to speak the English language? Is one of the ways is the use of our native language or first language to help the learners learn the target language, which is English. To read aloud, we model gestures or like actions. We also allow them to be in a small group or partner work. So that could be one of the scaffolding strategies. Sentence structures or starters like I know and then blank, because blank. So we are going to let the students fill in the blank, but we give them a structure. And then connect to background knowledge, our prior knowledge, or our schema. We can make use of graphic organizers, which is very effective as well. And then the visuals, images, visuals, and realia. So these are some of the scaffolding strategies that we can do or we can utilize as English language teachers. And then it depends on what skill you are developing to your learners. So it could be if it's a speaking, if it's listening, if it's writing, if it's reading, and more. Okay, so education research, Ellen Raymond says the CPD or the zone of proximal development, it's actually the distance between what children can do by themselves and the next learning that they can be helped to achieve with competent assistance. That's why I told you earlier that as a teacher, you should know where the student is and what the student can do, because it is where you are going to fill in. Okay, it's where you are going to bridge. That is why the zone of proximal development. So remember on how awesome and helpful scaffolding strategies can be when it comes to the student learning. So you have to really determine what student can do and what student cannot. And in between with what student can do and what the student cannot do, it's where you are going to fill in, you're going to model, that is for the zone of the proximal development. So here, in this area here, the one in the pink, and the one in the middle in this Venn diagram, this is the commonality, and this is here where student would develop. Okay, because gaabot man ang dili mabuhat estudyante o ang iyang mabuhat, dinha ka ni padayon ni fill in ka diha para ma-develop ang learning sa bata. That is the zone of proximal development. I believe this is very good illustration on how we could understand the zone of proximal development. So, for example, we are English language teachers. You did some pre-test. Okay? Kabatay ka, asa dapita maayo ang mga estudyante, asa po dapita that they lack, and then in between, it's where you are going to put on the intervention or your scaffolding strategies para you could fill in what the student cannot. Okay? So, sa hinay-hinay ba mo, gradually, and then student would be able to develop and learn. So that is how the zone of proximal development works. Now, scaffolding strategies that we can use in our classroom would be number one, aside from the ones that I already mentioned or that we discussed, we have here show and tell. How many of us here, class, that we learn best by seeing rather than hearing about it? So show and tell, meaning there are illustrations, diagrams, or pictures or videos that you will show to your learners and tell about it, discuss about it. Because if you just keep on talking without anything visual that you are showing to the students, it may be difficult. It may be difficult for the learners to imagine. So as much as possible, we have to make sure we show something real. We show something that students can see.
Joan was recently invited to a high school soccer game by a friend.
Okay, this point we'll be looking into what is prior knowledge. You know, prior knowledge, it is our schema, it is our background knowledge, it is something that we already knew.
Joan was recently invited to a high school soccer game by a friend. Having only attended basketball games before to see her own son play, Joan was concerned that she would be completely lost because she didn't know anything about the game of soccer. She even hesitated to accept the invitation, but decided to go anyway. After all, she was going to support her friend's daughter, but in the back of her mind, she was concerned that she wouldn't even know when to cheer. Her son told her it would be easy to understand soccer because she already understood basketball. How could understanding basketball make it easier for Joan to understand soccer?
So it is a very good example because it's making use of what the learner know about basketball to understand a new game, which is soccer. And by pulling out that you have in the past or that you already learned or previously learned, that knowledge that you already previously learned, you pull it out to learn something new, the knowledge you just got or the knowledge that you pulled out, we call that the prior knowledge. So here,
it's easier for her to learn new information, soccer. She had some prior knowledge. What we already know about a topic before learning more about it is prior knowledge. It is what we already have in our brain before we learn more. Even when we think we may not know anything about a topic, we may have heard something about it, seen it before, or experienced something similar. Our previous experiences, as limited as they may be, are our prior knowledge. A perfect example is this lesson. You may have not already known what prior knowledge was, but you may know what the word prior means before, and knowledge has to do with information. Your brain starts to make meaning of this by trying to connect it to the words you already know. Psychologists who study how we learn have stated that prior knowledge is the single most important factor in learning. Prior knowledge makes it easier for us to learn new things because of how our brain works. When we learn, we connect new learning to what we already have in our brains, forming something like a bridge between the old and the new. That bridge, or connection, makes learning easier.
Okay, so that is what is meant by prior knowledge, and I believe it's being explained well. So let's proceed. Earlier class first is show and tell, and then now we tap into prior knowledge, the information that we knew before, okay, things that we learned in the past, because at some point there are topics that we thought, we just come across about it, but later on as we keep going, we would know that it is not that unfamiliar after all, because we have some knowledge in the past that we can just at the same time make use to understand better the new information that we are absorbing as of the moment. So ask students to share their own experiences, hunches, and ideas about a content or concept of study and have them relate and connect it to their own lives. And launching the learning in your classroom from the prior knowledge of your students and using this as a framework for future lessons is not only a scaffolding technique, but many would agree it's just plain good teaching. So give time to talk. Now, all learners, we have to let them talk, need time to process new ideas and information, and they also need time to also at the same time verbally make sense, okay, of and articulate their learning with a community of learners who are engaged in the same experience and journey. And then pre-teach vocabulary. Now, there are some instances that, of course, students may come across with vocabulary, so we have to make sure we pre-teach it in order for us to scaffold the learner's learning, referred to as front-loading vocabulary, and this is a strategy that perhaps even teachers don't use enough, but very effective, really. And then we use visual aids, graphic organizers, some pictures and charts can all serve as scaffolding tools. And graphic organizers are very specific in that they help kids visually represent their ideas, organize information, and grasp concepts such as sequencing and cause and effect. So I believe because the visual aids, like the graphic organizer, are really very helpful. And also we're trying to teach students how to read or how to analyze something that they have seen, or for example, graphs, or for example, a picture, or a table, or a pictograph. So that's providing students something that making use of their prior knowledge in a way in order to basically know what do these graphic organizers or these visual aids in general are trying to communicate to us. And then we do have pause, ask questions. As a teacher, we could pause, ask questions, pause again, and then review. And by pausing, by asking questions and pausing again and reviewing, we are also giving, or we are also applying some scaffolding strategies to our students. And we have here the other scaffolding strategies. No, this is the scaffolding strategy that we discussed already earlier. Just I would like to reiterate, we can make use of our first language. For example, when we were in grade school, in elementary, trying to learn about new vocabulary, the teacher would not tell you, oh, this is the English term of blah, blah, blah. More or less, the teacher is using our native language, the Cebuano Visayan, to translate what is the equivalent of the specific language to Cebuano. For example, we would say, father, o papa na siya sa Cebuano. Mother, mama na siya. So the mere using of Cebuano language to develop or to aid learning is scaffolding. Use of first language, reading aloud, modeling or making use of gestures, and then we expose the students to some intentional small group or partner work, and some sentence structures and status, and connect to background knowledge, making use of graphic organizers, visuals, and realia. These are some of the scaffolding strategies. We would like to search more and more scaffolding strategies that as a teacher, we could utilize to teach students the English language. So this is all class for our lesson 1. Our main focus here is discussing what scaffolding strategies are. So I will see you on the next video lecture for lesson 2. Bye, everyone. I hope, by the way, you learn knowledge, or you learn a thing or two from this lecture. Okay, bye, everyone. See you next time.